can remember that they're changing my voice. This video is about my region argument. I'm going to do it in points here. Point number one. When it comes to universal morality as opposed to systems of psychology, such as cult systems, which are very common these days, if one does not do what is exactly right, then it is their fault to whatever degree it is. To whatever degree it is. For instance, in a cult system, one might worship the earth and they might argue that survival and not offending anyone is magically more important than scrambling to help people. One could be hurt by scrambling to help people, but universally speaking, scrambling to help people is more noble and it creates a superior spiritual state. Why should one be an earth-hugging worm who just tries to live and tries to not offend anyone? In this way, moral absolutes exist, and so does the concept of universal morality. And my religion is universal pinpointed moral precision, mind you. Point number two. When it comes to conservative thinking, many so-called leftists are very conservative and in a way that is bad. For example, they might not want to address homelessness and racism effectively because they think it would make their nation a lot less white. One must also not support Antifa or have an illogical corporate movement, etc., in order to truly be for what is right, in order to have an open mind, in order to be for individual rights within sound reason. So we see that, the conservative thinking is very bad, very bad. It prevents people from having an open mind. It prevents people from truly being for what is right, and it prevents people from supporting individual rights within the boundaries of sound reason. In other words, being for what is fair and just and right in reality and not in any game is superior. So that point is a little bit confusing, They've been doing a lot of stuff to try to distract me, which overkills why there should be a region argument, right? Because not everybody believes in universal morality, and a lot of people are gaslighting, playing stupid, what have you. We'll get to that. Point number three. Now, many of you might think that these things are obvious, but I had to start there just to help people see my point, as they are confused, disoriented, and disassociated from playing the game. Right? People are acting like children, really, they're acting like cowards, partially because they're confused, disoriented, and disassociated from playing the game, but mostly because it's how they've been bred and how they've been raised, what have you. Many white, Jewish, and LGBT people and their allies sought to make it harder for me to communicate these points, which also overkills my point. Very key point right there. So to make a longer story short, many people do not want to stop gaslighting. They do not want to stop acting like bitches. And they do not want to stop being immature scum in general. And therefore, there should be regions for the sane where housing, which can be built quite cheaply, is a human right. Part of the reason why I bring up race is that many conservatives want to treat people unfairly and they want to smooth it over, and some even want to bully people. So as a practical and logical way to allow for the most reasonable people in the society to have their rights, I think it is an unavoidable conclusion for the logical person for there to be a government-sponsored region. Okay, I might have said that in a way that's kind of confusing, but in other words, I brought up race because it's very significant in what's going on here, right? The white supremacists, Jewish supremacists, and LGBT supremacists, right? They're using technology and fumes and poisons to harass me, and in the process, they must have fumed many, thousands of Americans in this region alone must have been the victims of being fumed. And I don't know where else they're fuming people, but I've been fumed in San Francisco, I've been fumed in Oakland, I've been fumed in Watsonville, Santa Cruz, Morgan Hill, San Jose, Gilroy. So I'm pretty sure that lots and lots of people are being fumed all over the place. And they have various methods of delivering this. Sometimes people drive by with their windows down and fume me. Sometimes it's in some kind of thing that they're spraying in the environment already or something to that effect. It's in products in the store. It's their ability to deploy these things is well, they have various ways that they deploy these things, okay? And they think that if it makes it harder for me to talk, that somehow it helps them. No matter how you slice it, when you look at the possible reasons for that, it's clear that they're just fucking retarded. To try to understand why they're governing like idiots is like trying to understand why people who are retarded, no offense to them, make certain noises that are associated with retards. You know, it's kind of interesting, but it's not that important. The bottom line is they're fucking retarded, and I don't want to live in the same region as them. Okay, they're fucking idiots. Part of why people go to hell when they die. When you're that toxic of a soul, of a person, that you deserve to go to hell. And so why should people who are sane have to live in the same region as people who are hell-bound monsters and people who play stupid about things like people in church and so on and so forth? Okay. So again, so as a practical and logical way to allow for the most reasonable people in society to have their rights, I think it is an unavoidable conclusion for the logical person for there to be a government-sponsored region. Why should the best in society be abused by the rest? And many of the best are very poor as a result, mind you. So why should they be abused without being compensated and allowed the freedoms that the Constitution was supposed to allow them for? Supposed to allow for. For $200 billion, the government could make a region or regions where people do not gaslight people about things we all know are true. People are being gaslighted and denied affordable health care by greedy corporations and their allies. The populists are very right about that part and the fact that the rich oppress people in general. Okay. So, they're making it harder for me to kind of organize my thoughts here. If you have any questions, put in the comments. The things, I'm making very strong points, but they made it so I say it in a way that's a little bit difficult to kind of follow. Maybe the flow is a little bit off, but you still understand what I'm saying. Point number 4. Many white Jewish and LGBT people have been bred to enforce the white Jewish, LGBT, and token minority pecking order on society. This is very key here. We know this for many reasons, right? There's generational clans members, there's generational social club members, there's, English Worlds and their extended network, their cousins, what have you, they're here. There's various people with old money. They've been bred to think a certain way. They've been bred to enforce white Jewish and LGBT supremacy. And we've, as a society, have tried a lot of things to get them to stop, okay? The most reasonable people have tried a lot of things to get them to stop, and they just refuse to stop. So at what point do we say, okay, let's build a region for the victims of these things, okay, and stop playing stupid about these? And they're very easy to prove, very easy to prove. We can point to wealth distribution, we can point to historical sabotage, we can point to generational trauma, we can point to what happens when you sabotage people certain ways, what happens when you practice nepotism and favoritism in corporations. We can point to a lot of things that make it crystal clear that these things have caused very obvious effects, and the only way to kind of address this effectively is to create a region where people are completely free, with an emphasis on the biggest victims of this system being compensated. People who have been targeted for years and years and years. Like me, I've been targeted my whole life just for the sick and sadistic games of nerds, sexual sadists, corporatists, control freaks, white Jewish and LGBT supremacists, what have you. Okay. Now keep in mind, I don't think that people are smart enough to do this. But the smart thing to do is to kind of look at things and say, hey, what should be done here? And to understand how far we are off from the mark. Okay, so when it's time for people to decide whether they want to kill themselves, shoot out with, whatever it is, right? Say you were in Nazi Germany and you say, hey, should you shoot out with the Nazis, right? And call to life. Well, you got to look at the situation and say, well, what's going on here? What is it? What does it mean? What should we do? So how long before you live in America where it's crystal clear that you are better off fighting to the death? And I'm not saying people should fight to the death, but that's a consideration. Because when you come to the conclusion that they're not going to treat you anywhere near fairly, what should you do? And if they censor your videos instead of discussing with you, what the fuck does that mean? That's part of why there's so many mass shooters and suicides, because they're not discussing it like mature adults. They're discussing it like psychopaths that abuse people instead, and that's not acceptable. When you're treated like that, you have to really ask yourselves, how far should you go, to secure your human decency, to secure your freedoms, right? And they say, give me liberty or give me death. What does that mean in this situation? The English aren't the only people that you should be willing to face to the death. Anybody who oppresses you, you should be willing to fight to the death against. It's very straightforward. Okay. Where are we here? All right, some of them even stoop to the level of trying to interfere with my free speech, and many abuse internet censorship laws and protocols to prevent, internet censorship laws and protocols to prevent free speech and to interfere with dating. They are 100% against freedom of assembly, as they only want people to assemble as controlled opposition or flag-waving idiots. Point number 5. Obviously, the problem is not that I am intolerant of other people. The problem is that they are intolerant of me. And they're extremists, right? These are people that starve 9 million people to death all over the world. They could easily pass legislation to solve it. Look how quickly they passed their big bill. Okay, they get these massive tax cuts, which shows you that they had money to spend while people are starving to death. Okay, they practice, and part of those tax cuts is for Americans in general. Instead of taxing them a little bit more and helping the most needy Americans, most vulnerable, people are dying without adequate access to health care, people dying in the streets, building rehabs, they just give spoiled brats more tax cuts. And not just the rich, right? The middle class. People, these are people who can afford to pay more taxes one way or another, whether it's just $100 a year, and that would go a long way if you spend it effectively to end homelessness and on food programs, what have you. So the people who are governing are obviously maniacs. They are mass murdering lunatics. Do they have to be shooting people in the streets randomly before you get it? Only an idiot needs the government to shoot people in the streets randomly before they understand that they're mass murdering idiots, okay, in this scenario. The evidence is overwhelming. Okay. So obviously the problem is that not that I am intolerant of other people, the problem is that they are intolerant of me, and that they deny the most reasonable in society their rights. A strong argument can be made to the effect that people who are assholes deserve to be punished, especially when they insist on abusing the most reasonable in society. Those who are righteous historically and those who are approaching righteous should not be abused by people. And people who won't rally to them and help them face their oppressor deserve to be punished. And people who are, ordering people to persecute me and people who are persecuting me deserve to be punished. That's pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of to what degree. Okay, so a strong argument can be made that, hey, they should keep abusing everybody who hasn't been reasonable in response to what's going on. Okay, but there should be a reason for people who are the most reasonable, because they don't deserve to be abused. Okay. Point number 6, I firmly believe that these things should be established in their real life form in the region, not some gaslighting bullshit, not some propaganda, not some theater art bullshit, not some, elevate me and my family unfairly bullshit, but their real life form. 1, romantic justice. 2, freedom of religion. 3, freedom of speech. 4, freedom of assembly. 5, freedom of the press. 6, the right to a fair trial. 7, the right to bear arms, and to keep in mind that there would be lots of law enforcement in the region. 8, the right to fair mental health assessment, not some corporate bullshit that the massive networks of occultists abuse and everyone knows it, not some sexual control bullshit. 9, a food program for those who do not find their way in that region, have trouble getting a job, what have you. 10, tax incentives for getting one's tubes tied, for females, which would address some of the opposition views concerns. 11, a fair school system without excessive homework that has various programs which include several that do not force excessive science, math, and history on people. 12, the right to practice martial arts within reason without occultists and other fanatics limiting person, persecuting them out of jealousy. I removed 13, and I'll explain in the comments. 14, freedom from organized stalking, workplace bullying, and covert harassment, especially harassment using technology. 15, free speech on the internet and no funny business on dating sites. 16, the right to clean air within reason. 17, the right to not have the government and corporations put hazardous materials and other unhealthy substances in the food and water, etc. And there's more points as well, but let me just wrap it up there. I'm running out of memory on my phone here.